Well, today we're going to sit down and we're going to talk with Mary Brown-Edokpayi, who is going to help us from veteranappeal.com and explain to us the ins and outs, starting at that high level and then dialing down to an appeal process for veterans benefits. This is something that trips a lot of us up in a parent project, especially if you didn't serve. It's something you don't want to mess up. It's complicated. It's the government, so it's not going to be easy. But luckily, we got an expert hanging on the line to talk with us today. So let's get into the studio. Mary Brown, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Will you bless us today with a challenging topic by jumping right through it? You, of course, are an attorney at law, so you love tackling challenges, and you're going to go head first. We're expecting that out of you.
Okay.
Maybe before we start jumping into that beast of veterans benefits and kind of how we come about in it and the behaviors that we see about it, could you start with talk to us a little bit about you personally? What's your perspective to understand the process of the VA, of military service, and parent projects in general?
Yeah, so how I know the military is because I am a veteran. It was a former life ago, it feels like now, but I served as a Navy veteran or Navy service member on helicopters that don't work and they don't do them anymore. And so I've gone through the military process. I've signed that line and I've, know what it's like to be in the military. I have been doing veterans benefits law now for 6 years. I started off doing appellate work at the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, which is reviewing what the last level of appeal in the agency is the board decision to say these are errors. And then I've sort of worked my way backwards from there. I went from the court and now I'm doing agency level work for veterans and their families, pursuing benefits. I had a couple years where I focused on military sexual traumas. That's a little bit of a specialty of mine, for lack of a better word. And so I've been, at this point, I probably have represented thousands of veterans and their families in working through this big process of getting compensation benefits, but also making sure that they understand the healthcare benefits and some of the benefits that their spouses have if a veteran passes, as well as some healthcare opportunities and education benefits that these, the veterans are entitled to for their service.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. When with the veterans that you've worked from off the past, have you run into situations where families were playing a role in that veterans process or their path of trying to get it? And what does that look like? How does that manifest and look like from your guys' role?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we're having a family member involved, sometimes it's a child, like an adult child trying to help their older parents get involved. I had a case where the daughter was helping their dad to try to figure out benefits. We started off with actually doing non-service connected pension, which is a benefit for those who have served honorably. And they get that if they have income limits and they have served during a wartime. So you have to be non-peacetime period, which unfortunately is more of our military history than not. So most people do qualify, though there are some exceptions. And so I was actually helping his daughter navigate with him the forms, how to get him into a home that would accept those benefits, understanding what the application process looked like. There was actually somebody who they were talking to that was going to charge them to fill out the form. And they said, no. You don't have to, you don't have to pay to fill this out. And we were representing them on other service connected conditions as well. But in the meantime, this was a benefit that he could get fairly quickly while we're in the process of doing the bigger compensation process.
With that too, I think that's a really clear thing to state. I mean, you guys were supporting him in another case, but the fact that he didn't have to pay somebody to fill this out wasn't just because he was already seeing you there. It's because there are services there are advocates, right, that do this, that the government set up a system like this, right?
Yes. So there are attorneys that are involved, and historically, we're only really um, allowed to be involved during an appeals process. And then our payments
Okay.
come from not the veteran. We don't get paid by our clients directly. And then, but there are agencies that are veteran services offices. There are ones that are national. Some you might know, Department of American Veterans. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Department
Yeah.
of
DAV and yeah. Huh. Right.
American Veterans, there it is. And then there's American Legion. So those are what are national VSOs. So they have offices from one side of the country to the other. Veterans of Foreign Wars, you'll see those posts a lot. Some of them are international because even if you're a veteran that doesn't live in the United States, you are still entitled to your care. So there are options for international as well. Um,
Huh.
are also VSOs that work within regional offices for the VA. So there is the medical center where there are sometimes VSOs there, and then there's the benefits offices where there are sometimes VSOs that work inside of there. So, and then there are county VSOs. A lot of states and counties put together people who have gone through the accreditation process with the VA. So they know the process, they know the forms, they know how to help you get started, and they are free. You do not have to pay anybody to help you do this, and that's a big thing because there are entities out there that are charging our
Mm.
veterans to provide a
Yeah.
service that they don't have to pay for.
Right. So that's a great explanation. And then recapping again, so those are veteran service organizations,
Hmm.
VSOs.
Yes,
Many of them, like the VFW, the American Legion, I use Disabled American Veterans is who has supported me since I got out and continued times when we have to deal with stuff.
yep,
Um, you talked about attorneys then coming on also as a layer, but generally the attorney is not to come on until there might be an appeals process. Did I catch
right,
that correct? Okay,
correct.
which is honestly, I got to tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and I didn't even know that there was a group of attorneys that worked as that VSO because sometimes that's going to be a heck of a lot more. That's going to work a lot better for you than relying on DAV or that other VSO group whose real end of expertise is that front end of getting
Yes,
you in line and getting that first packet through. They're
right,
not great at the exception management process of it. And that's been a frustration. I know personally that's been a frustration to get through as much as I love the organizations, right?
right.
That's wonderful to know. And those attorneys they're that you're certified or they're accepted in some way from the Veterans Administration. Is that who
Yes.
accredits?
Yes. So there's actually an accreditation process that attorneys and VSOs go through. As attorneys, we have a little bit more of well, we have a higher ethical standard just because of what our bars require as being attorneys. And so we have to provide verification of good standing as being attorneys. You can be licensed anywhere and participate in the veteran system because it's federal. But we have to verify that we are still good standing with our local bars. We have to do CLEs. Actually, everybody that's accredited actually has to do continuing legal education and training in the veterans law area. That is true for attorneys like myself and others that I work with in my firm, as well as we say lay VSOs, so non-attorney VSOs. They also have an accreditation process and
Great.
continuing education process. So there are and we're all, you can find us all through the Office of General Counsel, which is OGC's VA accreditation search. So you can just Google it or Bing it if you're a Microsoft person, or Safari. I guess I'm trying to be all
Well, we
inclusive of
will
all
we
the
will actually
stores.
we will throw a QR code to that right
Perfect.
here when we go on, so you'll be able to see that
Awesome.
QR code.
Okay.
Yep.
So you can go there and find anybody that's accredited. If they're an attorney, it'll tell you when you pull them up, and if they're a VSO, it'll tell you that as well.
Great.
But that's really important that that is who's helping you, because, like I said, they are accredited, so they are bound by the same standards of duty and professionalism and knowledge that the VA requires of their own employees, as well
Yep.
as privacy. So if you have access to their electronic site called VBMS, don't ask me to say what the acronyms are because I can't remember. But that's the electronic document now. That's what the file is. It used to be paper and could go from office to office, but now it's all in an electronic system. And we have to be vetted. We get a background check. We
Right.
have to get a government ID specific to allow us to access that system. So there's a lot of insurances that the person you're working with, if they're accredited, like I said, whether it's an attorney or a non-attorney VSO, that they have passed the VA standard to make sure that we're giving you the best service possible through that accreditation process. So it's really important that you use someone who's accredited.
That's awesome. And we've had previous on the show the like national commanders of the disabled American veterans and other things like that for the lay VSOs. This is great as we start getting into the appeals process. So maybe one other pretext thing of information to kind of help orient. I know it helped me understand this, and maybe you can, since you train even attorneys, like this would be great. Okay, so the veterans process there's a medical side and there's a benefit side, and they work side by side, but they don't always talk to each other, and their systems don't always talk to each other. But when you start getting the ability to come into and once people figure out, oh, they're separate, got it, they're separate. But when you start the benefit side, oftentimes you have to go through the medical processing in some way, shape, or form to establish where you are. And people get really confused. How do you talk to people about that? Like, how do you help people and veterans understand what's about to happen and not go totally sideways?
Yes. So there is two parts to the VA, as you said. There is the healthcare side, and so that's where veterans who have honorable service um, can go and get their health care. And then there is the benefit side. There is a requirement by the healthcare side to give your records to the VA side when you're filing a claim for benefits. Um, what is happening, and something that I explain to my clients and also to other people that I train, is there is a growing part of the healthcare side that's called community care. There was a huge
Right? Yeah,
legislation
great
that
benefit.
allowed access. Yep, it is a
Mhm.
great benefit. One of the things that happens, though, is that your community care provider, right, who's got authorization from the VA to provide you services, well, the way they get paid is they send records to the healthcare side. Those records get scanned into your file, but it's like a link to those records. When the healthcare side is sending your records to the benefit side, all those community care records that have been scanned into your file that your VA provider can see, they don't go. So one of the things that we always clarify when we're arguing with not arguing, but when we're appealing to the VA to say, hey, these records are missing, you're supposed to get them. We try to get the VA to do their job, which is they have to go get them. But then I
Right.
also explain to my clients and to other attorneys, and we also have non-attorney case managers that work on our firm as well. Hey, let's make sure that they know that those treatment records need to get obtained one way or the other. So if you can get them,
Yeah.
great. Let's try to do that. So what we explain is that the healthcare workers, and especially if it's a VA provider, they are prohibited from providing opinions about how their condition is related to service. It's been a VA policy for a very long time to limit any conflicts of interest or um,
Yeah,
interference.
an inference by
Yeah,
somebody under contract that
right.
because that is an assessment. That's a highly
Correct.
structured assessment that's done,
Yes.
right?
And
Yeah.
it also could be an interference between the client and their provider if their provider doesn't give a nexus opinion that's favorable to them.
Sure.
So for your providers, that's one thing. There are examination, and most of them are going through private vendors now for the
Oh,
exams that
okay.
support. They will still go to the VA, but especially with COVID, it became more convenient and honestly pragmatic and required to do outside vendors to still do VA exams that support the claims. So those individuals are not your provider. It's very clear when you go there. And so when people are sending their family members or they themselves are going or they're talking to their family members about this exam, um, that person is there to just do an analysis of the file of the condition and give an opinion. And one thing that we see often is that our clients are coming back, or our clients are, um, if we're working with a family member, they're talking about how their veteran dad or mom came back. They can be unsettled because it doesn't
Oh,
feel It
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
feel helpful. It doesn't feel friendly. It doesn't feel therapeutic because it's not.
It's transactional.
It is
Very,
very
very,
transactional.
but that said too, even, as somebody, my period of service is in the 90s through
Hmm.
2007 or so, right? And
Right.
in going through this, then in 2009, 2010 kind of time, even in the VA hospital, it still was a pretty sterile process. Like, you went to a
Yeah,
specific wing at the VA
it's
hospital,
true.
and it was like, they're not going to tell you relation. Yeah, I was like, this is just the facts, ma'am, right? Like, they
Yes,
run you through. But yeah, yeah. And if you think about, especially, that's the introduction of the VA system, and who,
it's true.
if you're going to go get healthcare, you might think that's kind of, wow, man, I could see that really being a barrier. I'd never thought about that before.
Yeah.
Great comment. Yeah, good
So
point.
yeah, of course. I mean, that's definitely something, especially for somebody who's doing for mental health condition. And of course, as I had mentioned, being
Oh,
a military sexual trauma person for a while, it was like,
totally.
have your support systems, understand that they are not there to help you in a therapeutic sense. They could give you a favorable opinion. In that case, that is going to help in your claim, help with access to care, help with access to compensation. Um, but yeah, it is a point to keep in mind when you're starting to do this process, is that there are going to be opportunities to be examined, and they're not necessarily going to be a great healthcare experience, but it's
Yeah,
necessary. Actually, it's required to
yeah.
get your benefits granted, is you have to go through those processes.
Now,
We
is the
tend,
I?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, no, you're the one I want to hear from. So,
Oh, I was going to say, so one of the things that we do in our firm, and a lot of attorneys do as well, and we do that, I say to law firms because we have the funds to help our clients get access to this, is private opinions.
okay.
If clients are going through the VA process and getting negative exams,
Yeah.
we try to help offset that to the best we can by getting our own opinions and getting our own assessments. Um, that is less clinical. Sometimes a lot of it's now virtual, but it's less clinical. And so there is always an option to submit private medical opinions um, that may still require you to do VA exams, but at least you have that favorable evidence in there, and that can help in the long run as well
Okay.
to make the process less arduous if you have the ability to get a medical opinion yourself.
Now, with the community care, with that initiative coming through and seeing an
Mhm.
outsourcing of those initial uh, what do you not visits,
Exams.
examinations. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Wow, of exams there. Let's say that you're sent someplace, or you're working through some, maybe that's a type, but like a sexual trauma or something that's worked
Right.
from that avenue, because it's a group that I'm going to imagine where they send you, there would be somebody who's got a specialty in that in some way, shape, or form, or is it going to be, is it not? I mean, is one thing that sticks in my head is, maybe I'm going to go someplace where, while they just can't assign where it's coming from and whether it was service related disability, maybe they have access to some of the additional coping tools or support groups or other things like that, because they see this often enough. Or is it assigned, as a point of clarity, is it just assigned to an MD, and generally they try to keep that as sterile as possible?
So for most sexual trauma claims, they are pursuing it. There's a psychiatric condition associated with it. So for purposes of the exam, the person can ask for a gender specific examiner,
Okay.
but that does not mean that the examiner they're going to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because the VA requires that if they're engaging with a trauma related diagnosis. But they're not necessarily going to be trained specifically with regards to um, trauma or military sexual trauma. That
Okay.
being
That's,
said,
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like,
Yeah,
while it might work out, I think you do great justice just to set the tone of what could happen. Like, just the
exactly.
facts, right? And of course, you're an attorney, so that's what you guys do.
Yeah,
Like, this is the function. It is set up to work this way because it's an
yeah.
administrative process. Yeah.
That
Okay.
being said, though, for specifically for combat and military sexual trauma survivors, there are special treatment centers called vet centers that are outside of the VA system, because sometimes that can be very triggering to go to a VA medical center for
Yeah.
those individuals. And so there are vet centers that are outside of the traditional VA system that are accessible to individuals who need that care. And you do not have to be service connected. You don't even have to be trying to get service connection. And they will provide services to you in support of
Right.
that experience. The other thing as well is that some of our veterans who have gone through either personal trauma, combat, they don't always have a honorable discharge. So,
Mm.
and so they will not be allowed. They're supposed to be allowed care at the VA Medical Center, but a lot of times they will be turned away. But vet centers will provide psychiatric care. They don't do general medical, but they will provide psychiatric care for anybody that comes in and says, I have personal trauma, I have combat trauma. They are specifically trained to help people in those with that specific type of trauma history. So, something I always like to reassure and remind everybody is that if you do have somebody that has a trauma, even if they have an other than honorable discharge, and you're trying to work on that, they can still get access to care through the vet centers.
That's fantastic. In fact, I see us highlighting that in short just to make sure people understand that. That is,
Perfect.
yeah, that's a wonderful thing to
Yeah.
know across the board because it's okay. So this you're giving a great segue into pushback, right?
Okay.
Pushback of why people don't. I mean, this is I have a hard time when I go to community care. Gets a little easier for me, but
Yeah.
I came home. I was blessed to come home from combat from Iraq, and I was blessed to come home with all my fingers and my toes, and
Yeah.
generally some injuries that had to be dealt with in surgery a little later. But I'm there, and when I spend time in a hospital, in a VA hospital, and I'm in front of somebody who's missing half of their brain or something, it's really impactful on me,
Mhm.
and it's something to come through. There was a lot of people who coached me, including some of those people who coached me of the importance of us being together and being
Yeah.
there and going through that experience there. But man, there's a lot of reasons why people aren't comfortable with this. What are the most
Yeah.
common ones that you see, and how do you talk to families about that?
So some of the most common ones that we deal with or we hear, because again, we're to getting appeals. So this is mostly people that have finally jumped in and done it, right? But very commonly, the things that we see in their record when they're finally filing or talking to us and trying to explain why they hadn't gotten care or they had not submitted a claim, is really that is the idea that trying to engage in this after getting out of a service that maybe wasn't that smooth, maybe wasn't the best experience in their life, right? They just didn't want to be around it. They could not be around it. So, you know, the idea of having to go to a medical center, a VA medical center that maybe requires them. So my experience a lot with resistance was trauma survivors, sexual assault trauma survivors were like, so if it's a female, I'm mostly with males. That's who I have to sit next to, and they remind me of the experience I went through. I know when I went to one of them for reasons, I don't go to VA medical centers for care just because I have insurance, and so I'm really happy that I have that. Um, but it was like it just reminded me of boot camp. So I think one of the things that a lot of people experience is that it is old structure, old infrastructures, old mentalities. Like there's a lot of times where there's mostly focusing on male veterans because for a long time that was the majority of the patients. And so, we don't try to coach people into like, you should go to the VA. We really don't, because it's like, it's not really our place. But we do emphasize to them the reason why it's important to keep pushing through for their benefits, even though
Yeah,
they do have to keep going to the VA exam sometimes. And even though they do have to, revisit telling their story over and over again and facing that denial on the next one is to
scrutiny
say, look,
even. Yeah,
and the scrutiny, I
yeah.
have
I
so
mean,
many
even right of
people,
your service. Yeah,
yeah, they're like, they're telling me I'm lying because they're denying me. And I'm like, meh, that's not, but you can see where they get that from because of the
totally.
verbiage of the decision. So for us, at the end of the day, especially for those who are like, I just didn't think I needed these benefits. I didn't want these benefits. I didn't deserve these benefits, is a lot of us that work in my firm are veterans. So we can just say, look, we all signed that line and this is the promise and you're not okay. And you deserve this. This isn't a handout, right? Like you literally
Right.
signed that line to put your life on the line if necessary. And you wouldn't be in this position otherwise. So we really kind of help people understand that it's a benefit they've earned and that was promised to them, and that it's not, it's not a less thing for them to go through this process. The other thing I always emphasize to people too is I'm like, look, you can provide for your family. If we have somebody that's really disabled and they can't work and they have kids, it's like, look, we go through this process and keep fighting to get total disability for you, you you're going to have health care. You can get spousal support if your spouse needs care. You can get education benefits for your child. So, and that's also true if you're the child or if you're the spouse, and you're
Yeah.
trying to help your family
Caretaking.
member to go through this.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
exactly.
So since our audience is those caretakers, those family caretakers, and some of us are at the beginning of that caretaking journey, it's just
Yeah,
we're just starting to realize, oh, this is going to be a thing and it's going to set in. And so you're trying to collect as many resources as possible. Maybe you and I could talk really quickly about those key guarded documents and what
yes,
the heck I'm looking for to get started off of this, so that
yeah,
I know if I could ask you to go up maybe to the lay VSO or to the VSO level up there, right? When
sure,
somebody decides, okay, I need to get on board with some of this,
yeah.
what are we looking for?
Really, the only document you need is your DD-214 to show that you have service. That is
DD
the
214. Yeah.
That is the document that will get you for VSOs to get benefits started, but also to take it to the medical center to start getting access to services. So whether you stay at the VA Medical Center for services or you want to get cleared or authorized for community care, the DD-214 is the thing that will do it. Now, if you are a reservist and you have qualifying period of service, that the document you're going to be looking for is called an NGB 22. Both of those things are the things that document that you have service that is determined to be honorable, or qualifying. Let me just rephrase that, qualifying, because technically dishonorable isn't the bottom line.
And
So
so
that,
what,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, on that, because you did reference NGB 22 for National Guard Bureau 22, right? Or to
Yeah,
the
but it's any
reservist.
reservist. Yeah.
So the Federal Reserve, though, and the Army Reserve, would they use a DD 214, or would they use they wouldn't use an NGB 22, right? They'll use a DD 214 for the Federal U.S. Army Reserve.
Yes. So there
Right.
is, so thank you. So the
No
reservists
worries.
all have NGB 22 for their period of inactive service. But if you are a reservist and you are activated to active duty under Title 10 and your DD, you will get a DD 214. So for every time that you're activated under Title 10, you will get a DD 214 for that period of time. But
Okay.
then your overall period of service, you will also get that separate document. I know
Okay.
National Guard, but from what I've seen, every reservist, regardless of branch, although a lot of them have been Army or National Guard, get also that NGB 22. So that tracks your entire period of contract service under your orders and affiliation with your reserve unit. The DD 214 is the document for any active duty. So that federal active reserve is that DD
Federal, and
214.
it and you'll be the turn off that, but I do believe the Army has the Army Reserve, which is a federal component, but not falls under NGB.
Yeah,
Unlike the Air Force, National Guard, Army, National Guard, all those, they all fall
true.
under off of that. So I guess that's the other side I'm thinking. So if mom
Yes,
or dad served in the 104th Training Division out of Eugene, Oregon, which is a reserve unit, that's a federal side of the house, and they're just going to see
true,
that, as opposed to a National Guard, which at a high level means they work for a state militia under a state
yes,
tag, all
yes,
organized through NGB back in DC. Okay, so
correct.
as you walk through their story and you're looking for those things, if you hear mom and dad were related to a National Guard, then you're going to see an NGB 22 for the time that they were just drilling and going one
Yeah,
week in a month, or on the IRR, the Ready Reserve portion,
yeah,
for every
yes,
time they got activated and deployed, or did a string of even 2 weeks at a time on on long sides. Those will all get registered on a DD-214 document. And then
Most
all
likely, yeah.
active duty service and federal is going to be there. Okay, cool.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome,
Yep.
awesome.
That's where you start.
That's where you start. Those
If
docs.
you're
Got it.
looking, yep, if you're looking for benefits in particular, if you have documents of diagnoses, that's also really helpful. If you have any medical records that help start the process of showing the VA, because they have three parts to get service connection. You have to have a current condition, you have to have something in service that happened, and then you have to have a way to connect those things together. So, but the VA will not start their own process in helping get other medical records or getting that
Yeah.
opinion if there's not at least some way to show I have a disability. So if you have records that show a disability, current and over the course of time, that's really, really helpful.
That is hard. So, in a disability, for the sake of when we're applying for this, is what a changing condition from when you went into the military to the time you came out of the military, a degradation of your ability to work and do, and ultimately something like that, or is it my legs don't work, or I'm seeing something
Yeah.
like what?
The simplest way to say is it's something that's a chronic condition that's impairing your ability to work.
Okay.
Everything about the compensation structure is trying to sort of offset the impairment in work capacity that your service has caused. So but if you have something that was documented in service and you can show that it's still a problem, then that's it. Degradation, in my mind, what I'm thinking about is it might have been something that existed prior to service and then got worse from service and is still worse. But yeah, so it's sort of this idea of a chronic condition. It's not, in other words, it's not acute, right? You're like, I got measles in service. I don't have measles now.
Right, right, right,
That's
right,
not going to do it, right? Or I
right, right.
twisted my ankle in service and now my ankle's fine. That's not going to work. But if you twisted your ankle in service and now you have arthritis in that same ankle, that's a disability.
Right, right. Okay, great. So let's talk through once that process is started. As you said, you're going to go see generally a lay VSO to get
Yep.
you started there and work your way through that. And we'll have links to several options of something that looks like for you. Where are other? You talked about if they were to walk into a VA medical hospital, they're likely to run
Mhm.
into somebody. What are other places where that family member might turn to first to find that lay VSO?
So again, if we're talking about at the medical center, they can also talk to patient advocates who
Okay.
can connect them with the VSOs. They can also connect them with case managers. So especially if your family member has multiple conditions or they're in multiple departments, so they have heart disease and they have, uh, lumbar issues, and so they have different things going on. Sometimes you can need a case manager to help manage all the appointments.
Okay.
Again, the patient advocate is a great resource for those who are wanting to start from the point of the medical system to also for benefits, as well as making sure that all of the care that your family member is entitled to through the VA system is being done. They can put you in contact with the caregivers program. They can put you in contact with pension. They can put you in contact with home care. So they can sort of point you in the right direction to maximizing the healthcare benefits. And then they also have connection for VSOs and other compensation benefits, which is the other side of the house for the VA.
Great, great. So
Yep.
you've mentioned a couple of times the importance or not everybody starts as early as possible or gets started earlier.
Yep.
Getting that door open. Can you set a tone about how long in general would somebody expect from the time that they decide to start today
Hmm.
would be that kind of end state, knowing that nobody's holding you to that, and the government sure as heck isn't going to
Thank
tell you
you.
exactly how long,
I
right?
appreciate that.
You put the
Um,
crystal ball away, because
yeah,
but in
yeah,
general, just when people are trying to prepare themselves for, how much time or life they may have with a loved one and they're looking for that help and trying to make these things match up. Sometimes
right.
that's an important component.
Absolutely. And the time frames have gotten shorter. In February 2019, the VA revamped their entire process. It was, initially this idea of appeals management, so just the appellate stuff, but even the initial decisions, for the most part, they used to always be like 2 years. You file it and wait 2 years. But now we're looking more at like a 6 to 12 month period for that initial time frame. And depending on the condition, it can be much shorter than that. But I think 6 to 12 months is a reasonable expectation for an initial claim to just get started and get that first decision.
Great. And a lot of that has to help, the community care initiative has to help a lot of that out, right? It gives you many more options to meet with people as you're going through those assessment processes and getting all of that information in, or is that after the first 6 to 12 months?
So the community care program is actually just providing health care to
Got
to
it. It's
qualified
not,
veterans.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I guess I thought it was being used like surge capacity for assessment. It's not.
Oh, no. So that's
Got it.
contract providers. So contract examiners
Got
are
it.
the ones that are kind of providing that surge.
Got it.
The VA has been using them for at least the last 10 years, but then they've really
Okay.
shifted most of the burden to them. And yeah, I would agree that there's like 4 of them now, and then the VA themselves are starting to do some of the exams as well. So now there's 5 different entities that are authorized to do the examinations required for claims that I would agree do help expedite this process.
That's great. And would we expect, should a family expect that there would be one, or if they had multiple conditions, multiple visits in order to go through those exam processes?
So, depending on the exams, the VA actually tries to put them all together. So, it can make it a
Great.
very arduous day of exams, but then it's just one day. Um,
Okay. So
Certain
multiple
conditions will
exams,
take
but
additional
got it.
visits. Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
Maybe multiple exams, but they'll try to get them in one time.
Yeah,
That's great.
pretty much as long as it's not hearing or psych, so as long as it's not a hearing or mental health, you will pretty much do everything else in one day.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
6 to 12 months that works from that. Okay. What do people? So now you get a blue piece of paper in the mail. It's got a bunch of information on it, and it's
Yep.
talk to us about what that looks like, if you would, please.
Yeah.
And it says something that we don't like. What do we do?
Okay. So what you're going to get in the mail is a letter. It's going to be a cover letter. The really important parts, excuse me, are in that very first top part. It says, we made a decision, and then it lists each of the claimed conditions and say that we've granted or denied or granted or denied, granted or denied. And then there's usually a section underneath it. If they've granted you benefits, now they're going to tell you how much money they're paying you. And then after that cover letter, which is about 5 pages long, there's the actual thing called a rating decision. And it sort of just repeats what the cover letter says, except it uses a bunch of legal jargon, copy paste from the regulations that say, this is why we didn't grant you, or this is why we granted you, and this is why we rated you. You will also get something that's called notification of appeal rights. And that tells you the options that you have if you are dissatisfied with the decision, what you can do. And so there's 3 different options now. There used to only be one option. And it also directs you to, I believe the VA also gives you referrals to places that could represent you as well. So
Okay.
if you don't like what happens, you have a year from the date of that letter, and the date of the letter will more often than not be a few days later than the date of the rating decision itself. But you have a year from the date of that decision letter date to take your next step. So I don't recommend that. And we always don't, when we get cases, we just keep rolling until we get our clients maxed out. But you do have a year to kind of figure out what you want to do. And at that point, you can contact attorneys will help you that are accredited. You can also go to a VSO. National VSOs will do appeals, not others, as I've found out from my colleagues who told me the distinction. The national VSO people are actually trained into being able to do appeals. And so you would want to do a national VSO or an attorney that can take the next step. Because if you don't actually appeal, and now it requires a specific correct form, then you lose whatever effective date. So that is whatever money you would have been entitled to from the first time you claimed it. If you don't actually appeal it, you lose that period of time that you might have been entitled to money that you didn't, and care, depending on um, the rating. So it's really important to try to appeal and send in the right form to be in an actual appeal to keep
Yeah.
the thing alive and keep that effective date, because that's where a lot of our clients literally have life-changing money provided to
Yeah.
them and their family.
You know, in one of our other guests that was a national VSO, one of the contexts that I thought was helped that conversation when we talked. So I'll reapply it back here if I could real quick. Was talking about what's being done with that documentation, and that we want our government, we want our people that administer money out of the government's purse to be really good at saying no. And so, and trying not to protect that money. So if we kind of come at it, if we can come and accept those letters, understanding that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to state no from that until they can come to an agreement where they don't have a technical, what's called purpose violation, as we've learned, of spending government money out of a purse for something that they didn't show exactly met the letter of a law that they could spend that money against. And that's the process. And so you can't take that too personal. They're not telling you you're a liar when it comes off. They haven't hit the burden needed in order to get over a purpose violation for how that pot of money is and what you're asking to be spent on. Did I get that? Do I still encapsulate that right? And
I think you're completely right. Yeah, I think you're completely right. And the other thing too is that, and maybe this is something that it helped me, it's helped my clients. The people that are issuing those decisions there at that low level are not attorneys. They
Yeah.
are just lay employees of the VA who have an adjudication manual that literally walks them through the decision process. And so, just like you mentioned, they have to get to yes through that decision process or they can't say yes.
Right.
And so, that's part of where I think it's helped people understand it's like these aren't lawyers. This is, I can tell you all day long that this is going to get granted, but that's because I can apply the facts to the law and interpret it through that. And the people that are issuing these decisions at the regional office level and anything before the board, they don't have that ability, they don't have that authorization to do that.
Okay.
I talk to a lot of adjudicators at the intermediate level through informal conferences. They are really trying to do the best that they can. I will say they are very compassionate people who we often have conversations about their hands being tied because they do have exactly that. They're like, I have to
Yeah.
be able to point through this rubric that gets me to yes.
And
So
many
it's
of
a
them
very
are
good
vets,
point.
in fact, right? I
They
mean,
are.
many,
Yeah,
yeah, there's a priority for hiring them into that position. So they do
correct.
want to get to that. They genuinely do. So when you get involved or when you've got an appeal process going involved, what's a time frame? I know, again, not holding against that, but if we have those generalizations, are we talking, is that like a couple of year kind of process, or is it much more succinct since the first stuff's done? Is it really a mash?
Yeah, so actually with the Appeals Management Act of 29 from February 2019, there is two levels of appeal that are at the regional office level, and they're actually supposed to be done within 4 months. I think the
Okay.
actual window is 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
So there's actually been some process in speed. If you're
Okay.
going to the board, you're still going to be waiting a couple of years, unfortunately. But the way you work around that, because now we can sort of make choices about how to fix or add evidence at a faster level at the regional office levels, you can get the same outcomes in a year or two total. Previously, we are waiting for in 5 and 6 years. So the next appeal step, if you're not going straight to the board, which I haven't had a good reason, but people
Yeah.
do. But if you're not going straight to the board, you're usually looking at a 4 to 6 period on the next level.
That seems worth it to go into a direction that way of looking at those options. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
we think
The
so anyway.
so in general, the high level, what does that lift look like? What's going to be requested of the family, and what should they be putting together to really support off that side? What will they be asked of?
Good question. So for the higher level review, there's no new evidence to add.
Okay.
That was one of the ways they changed it. If you want to, or you feel like you need to add new evidence from the last decision, you can use a supplemental claim. But the higher level review is a process by which you can ask for an informal conference call, so a call from that adjudicator, and then you can talk about what you think the error was in the last decision. So you can say, We submitted a statement that explained how I'm trying to put it in the frame of the family doing it, but you probably should have
Sure.
help doing it. So
Yeah.
your representative can say, hey, we put in this evidence or this statement of describing this in-service incident that caused this ankle twist. By
Yeah.
the way, there are no service treatment records. And so really the point of the higher level review is you are very much highlighting errors
Connecting the
in the,
dots too. Yeah.
you can connect the dots. And because they are sometimes going very quickly, I've had cases where they just missed a favorable opinion. Like maybe they got a couple of different kinds of opinions and one was not favorable, but then one was favorable. And so you can take the opportunity at the higher level review and say, hey, they missed this favorable opinion. So you can connect the
Wonderful.
dots. You can also highlight that they missed doing some steps that could actually result in a grant. So there's not really anything for the family to do at that point because they've already done their heavy lifting and starting the claim at the first decision. The higher level review is just to point out this should have been a grant because of XYZ, or hey, the things that we did before should have resulted in the VA doing XYZ instead of just denying it. So
When when the advocate's looking at that, are they looking to get a yes no covered, or are they also appealing and looking at like percentage awards and degrees of disability?
that's a great question. Yes. So there is the service connection.
Hmm.
And there also is the rating. So you can appeal a rating. So we do a lot with ratings for psychiatric conditions where there's a couple different places on the exam for the evaluator to indicate impairment level. And there's oftentimes where that in one indication is too low and the adjudicator missed the higher level symptoms. So we can appeal that. And then also for unemployability, which is 100% rating, even if your disability ratings don't add up to 100%. And that's a very fact specific argument. And we can say, hey, the evidence supports a finding that they are not able to work because of their service connected conditions. And so that is true. We can argue that ratings were not appropriately assigned.
Okay. Okay. And then, you know what? And I know we're getting long on time and kind of coming towards the end of this where we're going to land this
Yep.
plane. One of the other common ones are changes in conditions. So,
Mhm.
I have an uncle who's the one that got me to even commission in the first place and go to an academy. He's a military officer. Agent Orange was a real problem for him as a lieutenant, and then through his life, of service. Now, it originally it wasn't recognized as something. He's now his unit's really struggling with health problems from a lot of that.
Mhm.
I, being a chemical officer and dealing with burn pits and stuff like that, like those are things we just didn't think about, and it wasn't a part of that, but there have been changes there. What should we be thinking about, or just how does that relate to this process? If maybe we threw something in before and nobody
Yep.
connected those dots, but now all of a sudden there's been some change. Should we do something? What should happen there?
Yes. Great question. So that's really appropriate. And in August of 2022, the Congress passed legislation that touched on both people who are in Gulf War, but also for Agent Orange exposure. So it expanded the areas that they would concede Agent Orange exposure. It expanded the conditions for both burn pit exposures and Agent Orange exposures. That now that they've got enough evidence, they'll concede it that it causes that. So whenever, specifically for Vietnam related veterans, the VA is supposed to, well, it's true for all of them. The VA is supposed to send out notification to say, hey, we've changed the law.
Yeah.
You might now be eligible. So if you get that letter, should act on it. If you act on it, you not only can get these benefits granted that were denied before, the effective dates can be very favorable. And when you think effective date, think back awards, money in your pocket to pay for car payments, house repairs, medical care, but also access, a longer period of access to medical care as well. So, yeah, if there is a notification or if you see online or an advertising on TV or over the radio that there was a change in the law, then reach out to your VSO. or just file something. You don't actually need you don't need a VSO to start the process, but having that person as a point of contact from the beginning is really helpful because the VA sends out notification letters. They send it to you as the veteran or the claimant, but they also send it to your representative. So you don't even have to necessarily follow up with them and say, hey, I got this letter. Did you get it? They should be getting it too. And so, yeah, definitely when there's a change in law, or even if you do your own research, and because there's research coming out all the time, especially for Agent Orange, about how it might be linked, add in that evidence, add in that claim, and keep fighting because eventually everything's going to be related to Agent Orange, I feel like, for all of our veterans during that period of time. And then the burn pit and stuff is going to be the same way. So anytime you see or learn of a new connection that maybe wasn't thought of before, you can send it in.
And those are those are going to be supplemental claims off of the original, or there'll be new claims. Okay, great. Okay, cool.
No, they'll be supplemental. Yep.
Okay. Here we go. Boy, Mary Brown, you rocked that. That was awesome. Talk to me. How do people get more information with you guys and your kind of expertise?
So for my company or just in general?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. So I work for Cameron Firm. We are veteranappeal.com. I think, and you can really just go to that website. We have a chat that a chat button will pop up and you can kind of do that chat. It has our phone number. And the thing that we do is that if you call and ask and tell us your situation, if we cannot help you, we have a list of referrals for you. We have other sister companies that we can refer you to, other law firms that maybe focus on different types of claims than we do. Or if it's, just a benefit that we don't work on, or it's not a stage that we can work on, we refer you out. And in some cases, we can even do that initial claim for you. Our whole intake crew is wonderful. They're highly educated. They are desperate to help, even if we can't help you. We really try to make sure that we're connecting veterans or their family members to the services that they need, even if it's not from us.
Well, obviously a wonderful pool of expertise to draw off of having you back there. I'd love to have you as a trainer for our organization. Extremely knowledgeable. You broke it down really well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the time you took to break that down for everybody and sharing your time, talents, and treasures with us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And thank you for your service and for providing this to all of your viewers. It's been a pleasure and I hope it helps.
Cameron Firm PC is a veteran-owned law firm. There is no fee until you win, and our firm has won over $100 million in the last 10 years. As a veteran, you deserve the best representation. Schedule a free consultation today. Call 800-861-7262. At Cameron Firm PC, we stand with veterans and their families across the country. We'll take a close look at every part of your case, handle all the paperwork accurately, and gather every piece of evidence we need to support your appeal.
After fighting the VA for 5.5 years on my own, I was receiving denial after denial. With Cameron Law Firm, I just received 80% disability. I highly recommend Cameron Law Firm to any veteran who is struggling with VA disability claims.
We're thorough because we care about getting you every benefit you deserve. Have you been denied VA disability benefits? If your claim was denied, don't hesitate to reach out. Call us at 800-861-7262 or visit us at veteranappeal.com and fill in the contact form for a free consultation. Let's team up to secure the benefits you've earned.
Well, that's it for the team this week, and thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed the content, remember to subscribe and to share this episode on the app that you're using right now. Your reviews and your comments, they really help us expand our reach as well as our perspective. So if you have time, also drop us a note. Let us know how we're doing. For tips and tools to clarify your parent project, simplify communication with your stakeholders, and verify the professionals that you choose, you can find us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for trusting us. Until our next episode, behold and be held.
Thank you for listening to this Parent Projects podcast production. To access our show notes, resources or forums, join us on your favorite social media platform or go to parentprojects.com. This show is for informational and educational purposes only. Before making any decisions, consult a professional credentialed in your local area. This show is copyrighted by Family Media and Technology Group Incorporated and Parent Projects LLC. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcast.